I was sitting by the window, watching a man cry in the parking lot, when I realized something about my own life. He wasn't old, maybe 50, standing beside a car, head down, trying not to be seen, and I remember thinking, no, I'll tell you about him later. Because that moment didn't start there. It started the day my own family made a decision for me. I'm 102 years old now, and people assume that when you reach this age, you've seen everything, that nothing surprises you anymore. But I'll tell you the truth, nothing prepares you. For the moment your life is taken out of your hands by the very people you raised. It didn't happen with an argument. No shouting, no drama, just a conversation. That sounded reasonable. That's how these things happen. Quietly, respectfully, in a way that makes it hard to say no. I was 79 at the time, living alone, still cooking, still walking, not as fast as before, but steady. My daughter started coming by more often, checking on things, opening cabinets, looking at expiration dates. You don't notice it at first. It feels like care, and maybe it is, but care can slowly turn into control if you're not paying attention. Then came the conversations. You shouldn't be alone. What if something happens? It's just for safety. Always said gently, always with concern, and I listened, because that's what I had always done. I had been a mother for over 50 years. You listen, you consider, you don't make things difficult. That was my mistake. I didn't ask myself what I wanted. I asked what would make things easier for them. That's how the decision began. Not in one moment, in small agreements, one after another, until suddenly it wasn't a discussion anymore. It was a plan. I remember the day they drove me there, clear sky, quiet morning. My daughter talking the whole way about how nice it was, how many people I'd meet, how I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. That sentence, I wouldn't have to worry anymore. It sounded like relief, but what it really meant was I wouldn't have to decide anymore. We pulled into the parking lot, and I saw the building, clean, organized, peaceful, and something inside me went still. Not fear, not yet, just a quiet understanding. This is where my life changes. We walked in, signed papers, met a nurse, smiles, kind voices, everything done properly. That's the hardest part. Nothing looked wrong, and that's exactly why I didn't stop it. They brought me to my room, a bed, a chair, a window, a space. That didn't know me yet. My daughter hugged me, said she'd visit soon, and then she left. I sat there for a long time, listening to footsteps in the hallway, voices I didn't recognize, doors opening, closing, a rhythm I wasn't part of. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never truly felt before. Not loneliness, not exactly. Something deeper, like I had been placed somewhere, not chosen it, placed. And that's when I understood something, very quietly. My life, as I knew it, was no longer mine. And I didn't even know yet what would happen next. The first night, I didn't sleep, not because of noise. It was quiet, too quiet. No familiar sounds, no clock I recognized, no kitchen down the hall, just a bed that wasn't mine, and a ceiling I had never looked at before. I lay there, staring, listening to my own breathing. And for the first time in 79 years, I didn't know what tomorrow would look like, not because of possibility, because of routine, a routine that wasn't mine. Morning came early, lights on in the hallway, carts moving, voices calling names, not my name, not yet. A woman came in, kind face, gentle voice. "Good morning, sweetheart." That word, sweetheart. It sounds warm, but in that moment, it made me feel smaller, like I had been placed somewhere, and my name didn't matter as much anymore. She helped me sit up, asked what I wanted for breakfast, but the question felt strange because I knew whatever I said would be chosen from a list at a time already decided. That's when it begins. Not the loss of big things, the loss of small choices. When you wake up, what you eat, where you go, all of it already set. And people think that's comfort. Sometimes it is, but comfort can also be the quiet beginning of disappearing. I was taken to the dining room, rows of tables, people sitting, some talking, some just staring, and I remember thinking something I didn't want to admit. This is where people wait. Not for something to happen, for time to pass. There was a man at the table across from me, didn't speak, just looked at his hands, over and over again, like he was trying to remember something. That wouldn't come back. A woman next to him asked the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. No one answered her the 3rd time, not because they were unkind, because they were used to it. That's what frightened me. Not the place, the acceptance, the way everything felt, settled, like this was the final version of life, and nothing more was expected. I finished my breakfast, or maybe I just stopped eating. I don't remember, but I remember looking around and feeling something rise in me, not fear, not sadness, something sharper, resistance, quiet, but clear. This is not how I'm going to end. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. I felt it, and that feeling was the first thing that still belonged to me. The rest of the day passed slowly. Activities, television, scheduled moments, and I watched people. That's what I've always done. Watched, listened, learned, and I started noticing something. There were 2 kinds of people there. The ones who had let go and the ones who hadn't. You could see it in their eyes, in how they sat, in whether they reached for things or waited for them to come. Most waited. That's what happens when your choices are taken away. You stop trying to make them, even when you still can, and that's when it becomes real. Not the building, not the room, the moment you stop choosing, even in small ways. That's when you start to disappear. And I could feel it happening, even in me. Just one day in, and already. I was starting to move with the rhythm of the place, not mine, theirs. And that scared me more than anything else, because I realized something important, something I hadn't understood before. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself, one small surrender at a time, and I had already surrendered more than I meant to. That night, I sat by the window, the same window where I had seen that man in the parking lot earlier, still thinking about him, still wondering why he stayed there so long. And then, something happened that I didn't expect, something small, but it changed everything that came after. I was sitting by that window, watching that man in the parking lot, and I couldn't stop looking at him. He hadn't moved. Same spot, hands on the roof of his car, head down, and then he did something I didn't expect. He looked up, straight toward the building, toward my window, and even though I knew he couldn't see me, it felt like he could. Like for a second, we both understood something the same way. Then he got into his car and drove away, just like that, and I sat there, thinking. He didn't want to leave someone here. That's what it was. That look, that hesitation. I had seen it before, just not from the outside, from the inside, from my daughter's face when she hugged me goodbye. That same pause, that same uncertainty, and suddenly, something shifted in me. Not anger, not blame, understanding. Because here's the truth most people don't say. Families don't always make these decisions because they want to. Sometimes they just don't know what else to do. And that realization, it changed how I saw everything around me. The people in that building. They weren't just placed there. They were loved in a way that had run out of answers. And that mattered. But it didn't change one thing. I was still there. And what I did next, that was still mine. The next morning, I made a decision. A small one. So small, no one else would notice. When the nurse came in and said, "Let's get you up," I said, "I'll try first." She smiled, like it was something polite to say, but I meant it. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, placed my feet on the floor, and I stood. Slowly, carefully, but on my own. It wasn't perfect. I wobbled a little, but I stood. And something inside me straightened with me. That was it. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, but clear. I wasn't going to give up what I could still do. Not because I was stronger than anyone else, because I had seen what happens when you stop. You don't just lose strength, you lose participation in your own life. So that day, I made another small choice. Instead of waiting to be taken to the dining room, I walked. Not far, not fast, but I walked. People noticed. Staff, a little surprised. Some of the others, just watching, and I could see it in their faces. That quiet question, is that still possible? That's how it begins, not with change, with a question. I sat down at the table, out of breath, but smiling. Because something had shifted. Not the place, not the rules. Me, and once that changes, everything else starts to look different. Over the next few days, I kept doing it, standing up on my own, walking when I could, reaching for things instead of waiting. Small things, always small things, but they added up. And then, something unexpected happened. A woman named Helen, who had been sitting in the same chair every day, watching television, not speaking much, looked at me one morning and said, "How do you do that?" I knew what she meant. Not the walking, the choosing. I looked at her, and I said something I didn't plan. I didn't come here to stop living. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I think I did." And that stayed with me, because it was honest. More honest than most people ever say out loud. Some people arrive in places like that and quietly decide they're done. Not because they have to be, because they don't see another way. And I realized something important in that moment. What happens to you matters. But what you decide after that matters more. That was the beginning. Not of escape, not yet, of something else, of taking back. One small piece at a time, and I had no idea just how far that would go. Over the next few weeks, something began to change. Not in the building, not in the schedule. In the way I moved through it. I stopped waiting to be told. That was the first shift. If breakfast was at 8, I was ready at 7:55. If there was an activity, I chose whether I went. Not because I had to, because I could. And that difference, it matters more than people think. Choice, even a small one, keeps you connected to yourself. And I held on to that every day, one decision at a time. Helen started sitting closer to me. At first, she didn't say much, just watched, the way I had watched others when I first arrived. Then one morning, she did something simple. She stood up, before the aide reached her, not fully, not steady, but enough. And she looked at me, almost surprised, like she had forgotten she could. That's what happens. You don't lose ability all at once. You forget it, slowly. And remembering, that's the beginning of everything. A few days later, another woman joined us at the table. Then a man, then another. No one announced it. No one organized it. It just happened. People started choosing, standing when they could, walking when they could, speaking when they felt like it. Small things, always small. But the room felt different, lighter, more awake, like something had shifted just enough. The staff noticed. Of course they did. At first, they were cautious, watching closely, making sure no one fell. But then something changed in them too. They stopped doing everything for us and started letting us try. That's important, because sometimes people help you so much, you forget how to help yourself. And once you forget that, it's hard to get it back. One morning, a nurse said to me, "You've started something here." I shook my head. "No," I told her. "I just didn't stop. That's the difference. I didn't create anything new. I held on to something old, the part of me that still chose, that still moved, that still participated, and that spread. Not because I told anyone to do it, because they saw it was possible. That's how change really happens. Not through instruction, through example. Weeks turned into months, and I began to notice something else. People weren't just moving more, they were talking more, laughing, arguing sometimes. And I'll tell you something, when people argue, it means they still care. That's life. That's presence. That's not waiting. That's living. And I thought back to that first day, sitting in my room, feeling like my life had been placed somewhere I didn't choose. And I realized something I hadn't understood then. Yes, I was brought there. But what I did inside that place was still mine. No one could take that unless I gave it up. And that's what most people don't see. They think losing control means losing everything. It doesn't. It means you have to look closer at what's still yours, your decisions, your effort, your voice, even if it's quiet, even if it's small. And if you hold on to those, you're not finished, no matter where you are, no matter how old you are. And I would have stayed there, continued that way, quietly building something inside those walls, if life had not changed again, because it always does. And what happened next? I never expected. And what happened next came on a Tuesday morning. Nothing special about that day. Same breakfast, same hallway, same quiet rhythm of the place. I was walking back to my room, slowly, steady, when I saw my daughter standing there, by my door. She hadn't told me she was coming. She just stood there, holding her purse, looking around the hallway like she didn't quite belong in it. And when she saw me walking toward her, she froze, not shocked, just still, watching, really watching. I stopped a few steps in front of her, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "You walked here?" I nodded. "Yes." She looked down at my legs, then back at my face, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen the day she left me there. Doubt, not about the place, about the decision. She stepped closer. "Are you doing okay here?" Now that's a question people ask when they already feel the answer might be different than what they expected. I could have said, "It's fine. It's safe. It's what you wanted." But I didn't. I said the truth. "I'm still living." And she took a breath, like that answer landed somewhere deeper than she expected. We went into my room, sat down, and for the first time since that day, we had a real conversation. Not polite, not careful, real. She told me she had been worried, that after the falls, after finding me on the floor, she was afraid of losing me. And I listened, because I understood that fear. But then I told her something she hadn't thought about. "You were afraid of losing me," I said, "so you put me somewhere I could slowly disappear." She looked at me, hurt, confused, but she didn't argue, because part of her knew, and I didn't say it to blame her. I said it because it was true. There's a difference. We sat there a long time, talking, really talking, about things we hadn't said in years. And then she asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you want to come home?" That question, it stayed in the air because it wasn't simple. Home wasn't just a place anymore. It was responsibility, risk, independence. And I thought about it, carefully. At 102, you don't rush answers like that. Then I said something that surprised even me. "I don't want to come back to the way things were." She nodded slowly. I continued, "But I don't belong in a chair either." Silence. Then she said, "What do you want?" And for the first time in a long time, that question felt real. Not polite, not expected. Real. I looked at her, and I said, "I want to live where I still have to use my life. Not be kept, not be managed, used." That was the difference. The next few weeks, things started to change. Not overnight, not easily, but they changed. We talked with doctors, with staff, with my son, and slowly, a new plan came together. Small apartment, close to family, support, when needed, but space, to live, to choose, to move. And one afternoon, not long after that, I walked out of that building. Not pushed, not carried. Walked. Same doors I came in through. But I wasn't the same person, because this time, I knew something I didn't know before. No one can take your life from you completely, but you can give it away, quietly, comfortably, one small surrender at a time. Or you can take it back, the same way, one small choice at a time. I still think about that man in the parking lot. Sometimes I wonder if that day was as hard for him as it was for me. And I hope, if he ever came back, he would see something different in that window. Not someone waiting, someone still living. Because that's the truth I learned at 102. It's not where you are. It's whether you're still choosing. And as long as you are, you're not finished yet.